Dr. Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she adjusted the atmospheric scanner in her hands. The device hummed quietly. Its blue display showing the air composition of Kepler 442b remained stable for human life. 3 years since the first colonists had arrived on this distant world, and the planet still surprised them daily. Temperatures holding steady at 22 degrees, she called out to her research partner, Marcus Williams, who was collecting soil samples near a cluster of purple-leafed trees. The atmospheric processors are working better than expected. Marcus looked up from his work, his dark skin glistening with perspiration. This planet keeps proving the scientists back on Earth wrong. They said we'd need full environmental suits for at least a decade. He gestured toward the vast forest stretching beyond their small research camp. Instead, we're breathing clean air and walking around in nothing but field clothes. The forest of Kepler 442b was unlike anything on Earth. Trees grew in spirals, their trunks twisted like corkscrews, reaching heights that would dwarf Earth's tallest redwoods. The leaves came in shades of purple, silver, and deep blue, creating a canopy that filtered the orange light of the system's K-type star into something almost magical. Sarah nodded, making notes on her tablet. The Kepler Colony Project had sent them to study the planet's ecosystem before the next wave of settlers arrived. What they'd discovered was a world teeming with life, but life that followed rules different from Earth's biology. A sound echoed through the forest that made both scientists freeze. It was low, almost like a growl, but with an unusual melodic quality that seemed to rise and fall like music. Sarah had heard many of the planet's native animals over the past 3 months, but this was something new. "Did you hear that?" Marcus whispered, setting down his sample containers. Before Sarah could answer, the sound came again, closer this time. Through the twisted trees, a shape moved with fluid grace. At first glance, it looked like a leopard from Earth, but as it stepped into a shaft of orange sunlight, the differences became clear. The creature was larger than any Earth leopard, standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder. Its fur was a deep silver with spots that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. But the most striking feature was its eyes, large, intelligent, and distinctly blue. When it looked at the two humans, there was an unmistakable awareness in its gaze. "Incredible," Sarah breathed, slowly reaching for her camera. "The biologists are going to lose their minds when they see this." The creature took a step closer, then stopped. It made the melodic growling sound again, but this time it was different. The tone was higher, almost pleading. The alien leopard looked directly at Sarah, then at Marcus, then back to Sarah. "It's trying to communicate," Marcus said quietly. "Look at its body language." The creature's ears were forward, not flattened in aggression. Its tail moved in slow, deliberate patterns that seemed intentional rather than random. Most remarkably, it maintained eye contact with the humans, something most Earth predators avoided. Sarah lowered her camera slowly. "I think you're right. But communicate what?" As if answering her question, the creature took several steps toward them, stopped, then looked back over its shoulder toward the deeper forest. It repeated this action 3 times, each time looking back at the humans with those intelligent blue eyes. "It wants us to follow," Marcus said with certainty. "I've seen dogs do this exact behavior. This isn't a dog, Marcus. This is an apex predator on an alien world. An apex predator that's asking for help." Sarah looked at the creature again. Everything about its posture suggested urgency, not aggression. The way it held its head, the plaintive quality of its vocalizations, even the way it kept checking to see if they were paying attention. It all pointed to one conclusion that seemed impossible yet undeniable. The regulations say we shouldn't make contact with large native fauna without proper containment protocols, Sarah said. Though her voice lacked conviction, the regulations were written by people who never imagined something like this, Marcus replied. "Look at it, Sarah, really look. When was the last time you saw an animal on Earth show this level of intentional communication with humans?" The creature made the melodic sound again, more insistent this time. It padded closer until it was only about 10 feet away from them. At this distance, they could see the intelligence burning in its eyes. This wasn't just an animal acting on instinct. This was a thinking being making a conscious choice to seek help from strangers. Sarah felt her scientific training warring with her human instincts. Every protocol said to observe from a distance, to avoid contact, to call for backup. But every fiber of her being said this creature was in distress and needed help that only they could provide. "If we're wrong about this," she said quietly, We could be walking into a trap. If we're right, Marcus countered. We could be missing the most important discovery in human history. First contact with an intelligent species. The creature seemed to sense their hesitation. It approached even closer, close enough that they could hear its breathing. Then it did something that made both humans gasp. It sat down like a domestic cat might and placed one large paw on Sarah's boot. The touch was gentle, careful not to extend its claws. The message was unmistakable. Please. Sarah looked into those blue eyes and saw something that transcended species. She saw desperation, hope, and a trust that this magnificent creature was placing in them despite every evolutionary instinct that should have made it fear them. All right, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. We follow, but we keep our emergency beacons active and we stay alert. The creature seemed to understand. It stood immediately, moved a few steps toward the forest, and looked back at them expectantly. When they began to follow, it made a sound that could only be described as relieved. As they walked deeper into the alien forest, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would be remembered as a turning point, not just in their mission, but in humanity's relationship with the cosmos itself. The silver leopard moved through the forest with a purpose that left no doubt in Sarah's mind that they were being led somewhere specific. The creature's gait was urgent but controlled, stopping every few hundred meters to ensure the humans were still following. Each time it paused, those striking blue eyes would focus on them with an intensity that spoke of desperate need. Marcus checked his GPS device for the 5th time in 10 minutes. We're heading northwest, deeper into the unmapped section of the forest. The terrain scanner shows elevation changes ahead. Sarah nodded, keeping her eyes on their guide. The deeper they traveled into the alien woodland, the more she noticed details that their previous surveys had missed. The trees here were older, their twisted trunks thicker and their spiral growth patterns more pronounced. Bioluminescent fungi dotted the bark, pulsing with soft blues and greens that created an otherworldly atmosphere in the filtered orange light. The biodiversity here is incredible, she murmured, automatically cataloging the species they passed. We're seeing plant and fungal variants that don't exist in the areas we've mapped. The leopard's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, and it glanced back briefly before continuing its urgent pace. The creature's behavior remained consistent, always checking to ensure they followed, always moving with deliberate direction, never showing any sign of deception or threat. After another 20 minutes of hiking, the leopard stopped abruptly, its head tilted, ears swiveling like radar dishes. The melodic growling sound it made was different now, lower, more concerned. It began to move more cautiously, placing each paw with deliberate care. Something's changed, Marcus whispered. Look at its body language. The creature's shoulders were lower now, its movements more predatory. But the backwards glances it gave the humans weren't warning them away. They were asking them to be quieter, more careful. Sarah understood. We're approaching whatever it wanted to show us. They followed the leopard up a gentle slope between two massive spiral trees. The ground here was covered with a carpet of silver moss that seemed to glow faintly in the dim forest light. As they crested the rise, the leopard dropped to its belly and crawled forward, clearly indicating they should do the same. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances before lowering themselves to the ground. The silver moss was surprisingly soft and warm beneath them. They crawled forward until they reached the leopard's position at the edge of what appeared to be a natural clearing. What they saw below them defied every assumption they'd made about the intelligence level of Kepler 442b's fauna. The clearing was clearly artificial, carved from the forest with precision that spoke of planning and tool use. Trees had been selectively removed to create a circular space about 200 meters across. In the center stood structures that could only be described as buildings, not made from metal or concrete, but woven from living wood and guided plant growth. Impossible, Marcus breathed. This is a settlement. The buildings rose in organic curves, their walls formed from interwoven branches that had been trained to grow in specific patterns. Windows and doorways were shaped openings in the living wood, and the roofs were covered with the same bioluminescent fungi they'd seen in the forest, providing a gentle light that illuminated the entire settlement. But it wasn't the architecture that made Sarah's heart race. It was the inhabitants. Dozens of creatures moved through the settlement, and while they shared the same basic feline form as their guide, The variations were remarkable. Some were smaller and more agile, moving through the tree buildings with monkey-like grace. Others were larger and more powerfully built, clearly adapted for different roles within their society. All of them shared the same intelligent blue eyes. "We're looking at the first confirmed intelligent alien species," Sarah whispered, her scientific mind struggling to process the implications. "They're not just animals. They're people." The leopard beside them made a soft sound and gestured with its head toward the far side of the settlement. Following its indication, Sarah saw what had driven this magnificent creature to seek help from strangers. A section of the settlement was damaged, not from weather or natural decay, but from something violent and destructive. Several of the living buildings had been torn apart, their carefully guided growth patterns shattered. The bioluminescent fungi were dark in those areas, creating patches of shadow in the otherwise gently lit community. But worse than the property damage was what Sarah could see near the destroyed buildings. Several of the leopard people lay motionless on the ground. Others moved around them in clear distress, their body language unmistakably that of a community in crisis. "Something attacked them," Marcus said grimly. "That's why our friend came looking for help." The leopard that had guided them turned to face the humans directly. Its eyes held a mixture of hope and desperation that transcended species barriers. It made a series of melodic sounds different from anything they'd heard before, more complex, more structured, language. They were listening to an alien language. Sarah felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Here was a species that had achieved civilization, that had learned to shape their environment through biological manipulation rather than industrial technology. They had art. She could see decorative patterns in the way the buildings were grown. They had social structure. The way different individuals moved through the settlement showed clear hierarchy and purpose. And they were under attack by something that their natural abilities couldn't defend against. The leopard made the complex melodic sounds again, then placed a paw in Sarah's hand. The touch was gentle but insistent. The meaning was clear. "Will you help us?" Marcus was already pulling out his emergency communicator. "We need to contact the colony base. This changes everything. We're not just exploring an ecosystem anymore, we're witnessing a humanitarian crisis." "Wait," Sarah said softly. She looked into the leopard's blue eyes, seeing the intelligence and desperation there. What if whatever attacked them is still out there? What if calling for help brings more people into danger? The creature seemed to understand her concern. It stood and padded a few meters away, then returned with something in its mouth that made both humans freeze. It was a piece of metal, clearly artificial, clearly not of local origin. The surface was scarred and twisted, but Sarah could make out markings that looked disturbingly familiar. "That's not from any Earth technology I recognize," Marcus said carefully. But Sarah's blood ran cold as she examined the fragment more closely. The metal composition, the manufacturing marks, even the partial logo visible on one edge. She'd seen this before, in the classified sections of their mission briefings. "It's not from Earth," she said quietly. "But it's not from here either." The leopard watched their faces carefully as if trying to read their expressions. When it saw the recognition in their eyes, it made another series of melodic sounds. These were different again, urgent, warning, fearful. Whatever had attacked this peaceful civilization wasn't gone. It was still out there, somewhere in the forest. And now Sarah and Marcus were the only ones who knew that Kepler 442b was under invasion by something from beyond the stars. Sarah examined the metal fragment more closely while Marcus worked to establish a secure communication link with the colony base. The leopard that had guided them remained close, its blue eyes shifting constantly between the humans and the settlement below, as if monitoring both for signs of danger. "The alloy composition is unlike anything in our databases," Sarah muttered, turning the twisted piece over in her hands. "The manufacturing marks suggest advanced technology, but not from any human colony ship." A soft growling sound made them both look up. Their guide was staring intently into the forest beyond the settlement, its ears flat against its head. The melodic communication sounds it made were sharp, urgent warnings. From the tree line opposite their position, shapes began to emerge. The attackers were immediately recognizable as non-native to Kepler 442b. They moved on 6 legs with mechanical precision, their bodies a disturbing fusion of organic and artificial components. Metallic exoskeletons covered what appeared to be biological tissue underneath. and their movements had the jerky, unnatural quality of machines trying to mimic life. Cybernetic organisms, Marcus whispered, his face pale as he lowered his communicator. Someone's been experimenting with biomechanical hybrids. The creatures were clearly hunting. They moved in coordinated patterns using advanced sensors that glowed red in the gathering twilight. Sarah counted at least 12 of them, spreading out around the perimeter of the settlement, moving with the cold efficiency of a military operation. In the settlement below, the Leopard people had detected the threat. Their response revealed more about their civilization than hours of observation could have. They moved with coordinated purpose, but it was the coordination of a peaceful society, suddenly forced into defense. Not a military culture. Some of the smaller, more agile individuals quickly began herding what appeared to be young toward the center of the settlement. Others took positions that suggested they were prepared to fight, but their postures showed they were not warriors by nature or training. They're not equipped for this kind of attack, Sarah observed grimly. Whatever these things are, they're specifically designed for combat. The leopard beside them made a complex series of melodic sounds, then looked directly at Sarah. The meaning was unmistakable. These creatures had killed members of their community before, and they were back to finish the job. Marcus finally managed to establish contact with the colony base. Colony base, this is Research Team 7. We have an emergency situation requiring immediate military support. The response crackled through static. Research Team 7, this is Colony Base. What's your situation? We've discovered an intelligent native species under attack by unknown hostiles. The hostiles appear to be cybernetic organisms, possibly of extraterrestrial origin. We need immediate evacuation and military intervention. There was a long pause before the response came. Research Team 7, confirm your last transmission. Did you say intelligent native species? Confirmed, Colony Base. We're observing a settlement of approximately 50 individuals under siege by 12 or more cybernetic attackers. The natives have requested our assistance. Another pause, longer this time. Research Team 7. Standard protocol requires you to withdraw to a safe distance and wait for military support. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours. Sarah and Marcus exchanged looks. In the settlement below, the attack was beginning. The cybernetic creatures had finished their perimeter sweep and were moving inward with cold precision. 4 hours might as well be 4 days. The leopard that had brought them here seemed to understand the human conversation, even if it couldn't comprehend the words. It looked at them with an expression that conveyed both hope and desperation, then made a decision that surprised them both. It stood up and began moving down toward the settlement. It's going to fight, Marcus said, his voice filled with admiration and horror. It brought us here hoping we could help. And now it's going back to defend its people even though it means almost certain death, Sarah. Watched the magnificent creature padding down the slope with the kind of courage that made her ashamed of her species. Protocols and procedures. Here was a being willing to die for its community, while humans hid behind regulations and waited for proper authority. No, she said firmly, standing up and checking her equipment pack. We're not letting that happen. Sarah, we don't have any weapons. We're scientists, not soldiers. We're humans, she replied, her voice carrying a conviction that surprised even her. We don't win fights because we're stronger or because we have better weapons. We win because we think differently. She pulled out her atmospheric scanner and began reconfiguring its settings. These cybernetic things are using biological components. That means they need to maintain cellular function within those artificial shells. Marcus caught on immediately. Atmospheric poisoning. But how do we deliver it? Sarah was already working with other devices from their research kit. The fungal spores we've been studying. Some of them are toxic to cellular respiration. If we can create an aerosol delivery system, the emergency flares, Marcus said, understanding dawning in his eyes. We can modify them to disperse spore particles instead of creating light. They worked with the desperate efficiency of people who knew lives hung in the balance. Sarah's hands moved quickly to reprogram her scanner to identify and isolate the most toxic fungal spores from their samples. Marcus dismantled 2 emergency flares and began retrofitting them with the biological payload. In the settlement below, the battle had begun. The leopard people fought with remarkable coordination, using their natural agility and intelligence to good advantage. But the cybernetic attackers were relentless, their artificial components giving them strength and endurance that organic life couldn't match. Sarah saw their guide reach the first line of defense, just as one of the cybernetic creatures broke through. The Leopard's natural grace and speed allowed it to avoid the attacker's initial strike. But it was clear that courage alone wouldn't be enough. "Ready," Marcus announced, holding up the modified flares. 2 shots, maximum effective range about 50 meters. "We need to get closer," Sarah said, shouldering her pack. "And we need to time this perfectly." They began moving down the slope, using the chaos of the battle as cover. The cybernetic attackers were so focused on their assault that they didn't notice 2 humans approaching from their rear. At 30 meters, Sarah could see the details that confirmed her theory. The artificial exoskeletons were definitely protecting biological components. She could see organic tissue visible at the joints, and the creature's breathing patterns indicated they were maintaining cellular respiration. "On my mark," she whispered to Marcus. "Target the center of their formation." The modified flares would only work if they could create a concentrated cloud of toxic spores in the area where most of the attackers were focused. Miss, and they'd accomplished nothing except revealing their position. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering every lesson she'd learned about human ingenuity, adaptability, and the refusal to accept impossible odds. Humans had survived ice ages, conquered diseases, and traveled to the stars not because they were the strongest or fastest species, but because they could look at any problem and find a solution that no one else had thought of. "Mark," she said quietly. Both flares fired simultaneously, arcing through the orange twilight of Kepler 442b toward the center of the cybernetic formation. For a moment nothing happened, then the screaming began. The toxic spore cloud expanded rapidly through the cybernetic formation, and the effect was immediate and devastating. The artificial creatures began convulsing as their biological components reacted to the fungal toxins. Their coordinated attack dissolved into chaos as their organic nervous systems shut down one by one. Sarah watched with grim satisfaction as the creatures that had seemed so unstoppable moments before began falling to the ground, their mechanical limbs twitching uselessly as their biological cores failed. The Leopard people, sensing the sudden change in the battle, pressed their advantage with remarkable tactical awareness. "It's working," Marcus breathed, his voice filled with amazement and relief. "The spores are attacking their biological components faster than their artificial systems can compensate." The Leopard that had guided them to this place appeared at the edge of the spore cloud, moving with careful precision to avoid the toxic area. When it saw the 2 humans, its blue eyes widened with what could only be described as gratitude and respect. It made a series of melodic sounds that seemed to carry across the entire settlement. The response from the other Leopard people was immediate. Despite the ongoing battle, dozens of blue eyes turned toward the humans' position. The sounds that rose from the settlement were clearly expressions of thanks, relief, and something else: recognition. These beings understood that the humans had chosen to help when they could have simply fled, but the battle wasn't over. Sarah's scanner indicated that 3 of the cybernetic attackers had been outside the spore cloud's effective range. These remaining creatures were adapting their tactics, using their mechanical components to filter their air intake and avoid the worst effects of the toxins. "They're learning," she observed grimly. "The artificial components are analyzing our countermeasure and adapting in real time." Marcus was already thinking ahead. "We need a different approach for the remaining 3. The spore attack won't work twice." Sarah studied the surviving attackers through her scanner's enhanced display. The cybernetic creatures were indeed adapting, but their adaptations revealed weaknesses. To filter out the toxins, they'd had to modify their air intake systems, which meant they were now dependent on their mechanical components for basic life support. "Electromagnetic pulse," she said suddenly. "If we can disrupt their artificial systems while their biological components are dependent on mechanical life support." "We don't have EMP generators," Marcus pointed out. "No, but we have high-energy scanning equipment." Sarah was already reconfiguring her atmospheric scanner again. "If I can overload the scanner's electromagnetic field generator." She worked quickly, her fingers flying over the device's control interface. The modification she was attempting was dangerous. Overloading the scanner could cause an explosion that would kill them both. But the alternative was watching the Leopard people die at the hands of these mechanical monsters. The remaining 3 cybernetic attackers had regrouped and were advancing on the settlement's main defensive line. The Leopard people were fighting bravely, But without the element of surprise that had allowed them to take advantage of the spore attack, they were outmatched. "Sarah, hurry," Marcus urged. "They're breaking through." "Almost there," she muttered, making final adjustments to the scanner's power output. "This is going to be a one-shot deal. We get one chance and then the scanner's dead." The lead cybernetic attacker had reached the settlement's inner defenses. Sarah watched in horror as its mechanical claws tore through the living wood of one of the buildings, sending several Leopard people scrambling for safety. "Now," she said, activating the overloaded scanner. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the device was far more powerful than anything the scanner had been designed to produce. Sarah felt the heat from the overloading circuits even as she threw the device toward the attacking creatures. The pulse hit the cybernetic attackers like an invisible hammer. Their mechanical components sparked and failed instantly, leaving their biological parts without life support. The creatures collapsed immediately, their artificial exoskeletons becoming metal, coffins for the organic components within. The sudden silence that followed was broken only by the relieved sounds from the Leopard people and the soft crackling of burning electronics. "Direct hit," Marcus said softly. "They're all down." But even as they celebrated the victory, Sarah's mind was working on a larger problem. "This was just a scouting force," she said grimly. "Cybernetic organisms don't evolve naturally. Someone created these things and they sent them here for a reason." The Leopard that had brought them here approached cautiously, its blue eyes moving between the fallen attackers and the two humans. When it reached them, it did something that surprised them both. It pressed its forehead against Sarah's hand in what was clearly a gesture of gratitude and respect. Then it began to communicate in earnest. The melodic sounds it made were complex and structured, clearly a sophisticated language. While the humans couldn't understand the words, the creature's body language and tone conveyed urgency and information. "It's trying to tell us something important," Marcus observed, "something about these attackers." The Leopard padded over to one of the fallen cybernetic creatures and used its claws to carefully pry open a section of the mechanical exoskeleton. Inside, the biological components were unlike anything from Earth or Kepler 442b. The tissue was gray and lifeless now, but its structure suggested it had come from yet another world entirely. 3 different biologies, Sarah realized with growing alarm. Earth technology, Kepler 442b as the target, and these biological components from somewhere else entirely. The implications were staggering. Someone was combining technologies and biological materials from multiple worlds, creating hybrid weapons specifically designed for conquest. The attack on the Leopard people wasn't random. It was a test. Marcus's communicator crackled to life. "Research Team 7, this is Colony Base. Military support is en route, ETA 2 hours. What's your current status?" Sarah took the communicator. "Colony Base, the immediate threat has been neutralized, but we have a much larger problem. The attackers were cybernetic hybrids using technology and biological components from multiple worlds. This wasn't a random attack. It was a test run for something bigger. Research Team 7, that's impossible. We're the only human presence in this sector, and we've detected no other spacecraft." "Then they didn't come from our direction," Sarah replied grimly. "And they've been here long enough to study local biology and develop specific countermeasures." She looked at the Leopard, whose intelligent blue eyes reflected her own understanding of the situation. The creatures that had attacked this peaceful civilization were scouts for something much larger and more dangerous. The Leopard made another series of melodic sounds, then gestured toward the forest with clear urgency. Its meaning was unmistakable. There were more of these things out there, and the real attack was still coming. Sarah realized that what had started as a simple research mission had become something much more significant. Humanity's first contact with an intelligent alien species was happening under the shadow of an invasion by a third party whose capabilities and intentions were completely unknown. But she also realized something else. In the past few hours, 2 species that had never met before had learned to communicate, coordinate, and trust each other in the face of a common threat. If that wasn't hope for the future, she didn't know what was. The Leopard settlement had transformed in the hours following the attack. What had been a peaceful community of organic architecture and gentle bioluminescence now showed the signs of a people preparing for war. The Leopard people moved with new purpose, their natural grace now focused on defense and survival. Sarah found herself at the center of a remarkable scene. The first interspecies military planning session in human history. The Leopard people had brought out what appeared to be three-dimensional maps grown from living wood, showing the forest terrain in intricate detail. Their leader, distinguished by silver markings around its blue eyes, used melodic sounds and precise gestures to convey tactical information. They're showing us patrol routes, Marcus realized, studying the living map. These dark areas mark where they've lost contact with their scouts. Sarah nodded, using her tablet to create a digital overlay of the information the Leopards were sharing. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. The cybernetic attackers had been systematically eliminating the Leopard people's early warning network, creating blind spots in their territorial awareness. It's a classic military strategy, she observed. Eliminate intelligence-gathering capabilities before the main assault. Whoever's behind this has studied both our species and theirs. The Leopard leader made a series of complex sounds, then gestured toward one specific area of the map. The urgency in its body language was unmistakable. Something important there, Marcus said. But what? Their guide, who had remained close to the humans since the battle, seemed to understand their confusion. It padded over to the map and used its claws to trace patterns in the living wood. The marks it made began to glow with the same bioluminescence as the fungi, creating a clear diagram. Ships, Sarah breathed, recognizing the pattern. They're showing us spacecraft. Multiple contacts, all concentrated in this valley. The implications hit both humans simultaneously. The cybernetic attackers weren't isolated raiders. They were the advance force for a full invasion fleet. Sarah's communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission from Colony Base. Research Team 7, this is Colonel Martinez with the incoming military support. We've detected multiple energy signatures in your area. What's your status? Colonel, this is Dr. Chen. We've established communication with the local intelligence species and confirmed they're under attack by an invasion force of unknown origin. The energy signatures you're detecting are likely the enemy fleet. There was a pause before the colonel responded. Doctor, did you say intelligent species? Confirmed, Colonel. We're currently engaged in joint tactical planning with the local leadership. The immediate threat has been neutralized, but our analysis indicates a much larger force is preparing for assault. Roger that, Doctor. My orders are to extract you and Dr. Williams immediately. Sarah looked at the Leopard leader, whose blue eyes held a mixture of hope and desperation. Around the settlement, dozens of other Leopard people continued their preparations, trusting that the humans who had already saved them once would help them again. Negative, Colonel. We're not leaving. Doctor, that's not a request. You have no military training and no authorization to engage in first contact protocols. Colonel, with respect, the first contact protocols don't cover this situation. These people asked for our help and we gave it. Now they're sharing vital intelligence about an invasion force that threatens not just them, but potentially our colony as well. Marcus stepped up beside her. Colonel, this is Dr. Williams. The tactical information we're receiving suggests the enemy force has been studying human technology as well as local biology. If we withdraw now, we lose our best source of intelligence about their capabilities. The Leopard leader seemed to sense the tension in the conversation. It made several melodic sounds, then approached Sarah's communicator. When it spoke into the device, its voice was clear and unmistakably intelligent. Who was that? Colonel Martinez asked after a moment of stunned silence. That was the local military commander, Colonel, and I think they just volunteered to coordinate with your forces. Sarah turned to Marcus with excitement. They understand more than we realized. They've been listening to our communications and learning our language patterns. The Leopard leader confirmed this by speaking again, this time with recognizable English words mixed into its melodic language. Humans, help, together, fight. Incredible, Marcus whispered. Accelerated language acquisition. Their intelligence level is even higher than we thought. Colonel Martinez's voice came through the communicator with a new tone of respect. Doctor, I'm going to need a full briefing on everything you've learned. My ETA is 90 minutes. Can you maintain your position until then? Affirmative, Colonel. We'll be ready. Over the next hour, Sarah and Marcus worked with the Leopard people to compile a comprehensive intelligence package. The living maps provided detailed topographical information about the enemy position. The Leopard scouts had observed the cybernetic creatures' patrol patterns and identified weaknesses in their formation. Most importantly, The leopards had discovered something that changed everything. Their guide led the humans to a hidden area beneath the settlement, where bioluminescent fungi provided light for what appeared to be a workshop. Here, the leopard people had been analyzing fragments from the previous attacks, using their natural intelligence to understand their enemies. What they'd discovered was that the cybernetic creatures weren't just random combinations of organic and artificial components. They were specifically designed hybrids, created by someone who understood both human and leopard biology. The organic components weren't from either Earth or Kepler 442b, they were from a third species entirely. Someone's been watching both our civilizations, Sarah realized with growing alarm. They've studied us, learned our strengths and weaknesses, and created weapons specifically designed to fight us. The leopard leader communicated this through a combination of sounds, gestures, and broken English. Watchers, from beyond, study, learn, come to take a surveillance operation, Marcus said grimly. They've been monitoring multiple worlds, multiple species, preparing for coordinated conquest. But the leopard people had also discovered something else. The cybernetic creatures had a weakness that neither species would have found alone. The artificial components that gave them their strength also made them vulnerable to specific combinations of electromagnetic and biological attacks. Humans think with technology, the leopard leader said carefully, its English improving rapidly. We think with life, together. Stronger than apart, Sarah understood. Humanity's strength lay in their technological innovation and adaptability. The leopard people's strength lay in their biological understanding and harmony with natural systems. Separately, either species might fall to the cybernetic invasion. Together, they represented a combination that their enemies hadn't anticipated. When Colonel Martinez and his military support team arrived, they found something unprecedented in human history. A fully integrated interspecies command structure, planning a coordinated defense against an alien invasion. Colonel, Sarah said as she introduced him to the leopard leader, meet our new allies. I think you're going to be impressed with their strategic capabilities. The leopard leader extended a paw in what was clearly a learned human gesture. When it spoke, its English was clear and determined. Humans and leopard people, fight together, protect both worlds, or lose everything. Colonel Martinez, to his credit, didn't hesitate. He grasped the offered paw and looked into those intelligent blue eyes. Then let's make sure we win. The alliance that formed in that moment would be remembered as the foundation of interspecies cooperation. Born in the crucible of mutual need and forged through the uniquely human refusal to abandon friends in their hour of greatest need. The invasion began at dawn, when Kepler 442b's orange star painted the forest canopy in shades of fire. From their concealed position on the ridge overlooking the valley, Sarah watched through high-powered scopes as the enemy force emerged from their hidden ships. The scale was breathtaking and terrifying. Over 300 cybernetic creatures moved in perfect formation, their mechanical components gleaming in the morning light. But these weren't the crude scouts they'd fought before. These were refined, perfected versions, faster, stronger, and clearly designed for coordinated assault. They've learned from our previous encounter, Colonel Martinez observed grimly. Look at their air filtration systems. Each creature now wore a sophisticated breathing apparatus that would make the fungal spore attacks ineffective. Their electromagnetic shielding had been upgraded as well, rendering the EMP strategy useless. The enemy had adapted to counter every advantage the Alliance had shown. Good thing we've adapted too, Sarah replied, checking her modified scanner. Working through the night with both human and leopard ingenuity, they'd developed new approaches that their enemies couldn't have anticipated. The leopard leader crouched beside the human officers, its blue eyes focused on the advancing army. Its English had improved dramatically over the past hours, aided by what appeared to be accelerated learning capabilities that put human language acquisition to shame. They move in patterns, it observed. Mechanical thinking, predictable. We use this. The battle plan they developed played to the strengths of both species. The humans provided technological innovation and strategic thinking. The leopard people provided intimate knowledge of the terrain and biological warfare techniques that no human military would have conceived. Phase 1 initiated. Colonel Martinez spoke into his communicator. In the forest below, the first part of their plan began. The Leopard people had spent the night modifying their bioluminescent fungi, creating new strains that produced not toxic spores, but electromagnetic signatures that mimicked the energy patterns of their settlements. To the cybernetic creature's sensors, it appeared that dozens of leopard communities were scattered throughout the forest. The enemy force, designed for maximum efficiency, immediately split into smaller groups to attack all the apparent targets simultaneously. "They're taking the bait," Marcus reported from his observation post. "Force dispersal is proceeding according to plan." Sarah smiled grimly. The cybernetic creature's greatest strength, their perfect coordination and logical thinking, had become their weakness. They couldn't conceive of a deception that relied on biological manipulation rather than technological jamming. "Phase 2, go," the colonel ordered. The scattered cybernetic groups suddenly found themselves in a nightmare. The leopard people moved through their native forest like liquid shadows, using knowledge accumulated over generations to turn the terrain into a weapon. Tree roots erupted from the ground at precise moments, guided by the leopard's biological manipulation abilities. Branches descended like clubs, controlled through techniques that were part agriculture, part warfare, and completely beyond the cybernetic creature's programmed responses. But the real surprise came when the separated enemy groups tried to re-establish communication and coordination. Human-designed signal jammers, hidden and camouflaged by leopard biotechnology, created dead zones in their communications network. The creatures that had relied on perfect coordination found themselves isolated and confused. "It's working," Sarah breathed, watching through her scope as cybernetic group after cybernetic group was systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't understand or predict. But the battle wasn't won yet. The largest concentration of cybernetic creatures had identified the deception and was moving directly toward the real settlement. Over 100 of the enhanced attackers approached in tight formation, their sensors focused and their weapons ready. "Phase 3, Colonel Martinez said quietly. "This is where we find out if interspecies cooperation can beat superior technology." The final phase of their plan required perfect timing and absolute trust between species that had known each other for less than 24 hours. Human soldiers, armed with modified weapons that fired biologically enhanced ammunition, took positions around the settlement's perimeter. The leopard people, using their natural abilities enhanced by human technology, prepared to turn their own home into the ultimate defensive weapon. The cybernetic force reached the settlement's outer edge and immediately encountered the first surprise. The ground itself was alive and hostile. Bioengineered root systems, guided by leopard consciousness and enhanced by human fertilizer technology, created a shifting, unstable surface that disrupted the mechanical creature's precise movement patterns. "Now," the leopard leader said, its voice calm despite the approaching army. The settlement's living buildings began to change. Walls flowed like water, creating new defensive positions. Windows became weapon ports. The bioluminescent fungi shifted their light patterns, creating a strobing effect that interfered with the cybernetic creature's optical sensors. The human soldiers opened fire with ammunition that was part technology, part living organism. Each projectile contained fungal spores specifically engineered by the leopard people to attack the biological components of the cybernetic creatures, while human-designed explosive charges targeted their mechanical systems. The effect was devastating. The cybernetic creatures, designed to counter either technological or biological attacks, couldn't cope with weapons that were both simultaneously. Their biological components succumbed to the engineered spores while their artificial systems were destroyed by precisely targeted explosions. But the real moment of triumph came when the Cybernetic Forces Command Unit, a larger and more sophisticated creature that had been directing the assault, found itself face-to-face with the settlement's most unexpected defender. Sarah's guide, the leopard that had first sought human help, had positioned itself directly in the command unit's path. But it wasn't alone. Beside it stood Sarah herself, armed with a weapon that represented the absolute fusion of human and leopard capabilities. The device in her hands looked like a rifle, but it fired projectiles grown rather than manufactured. Each shot contained a living organism designed by leopard biology and enhanced by human genetic engineering, a symbiotic creature that could adapt to any defense in real time. "This is for your people," Sarah said to the cybernetic command unit, "and for thinking you could conquer two worlds at once." The living ammunition struck the command unit and began adapting instantly to its defenses. The creature's shielding meant nothing against organisms that could evolve countermeasures in seconds. Its armor became useless against life forms that could digest metal and plastic as easily as organic matter. The command unit fell, and with it, the coordination that had made the cybernetic force so dangerous. The remaining attackers, cut off from their leader and unable to adapt to an enemy that thought like neither machine nor beast, were systematically destroyed by the combined human-leopard forces. As the orange sun reached its zenith, silence fell over the forest of Kepler 442b. The invasion had been repelled. But more than that, two species had learned to fight as one, creating something stronger than either could have been alone. Sarah looked at her leopard companion, whose blue eyes reflected satisfaction and something deeper, the knowledge that their peoples were no longer alone in the universe. "We did it," she said simply. The leopard nuzzled her hand gently. "Together," it replied in clear English, "always together now." In the distance, the remaining cybernetic ships were withdrawing, carrying news of a defeat that their creators had never anticipated. But Sarah wasn't worried about their return. Any enemy that came to this world again would face not one species, but an alliance that combined the best of both worlds, human innovation and leopard wisdom, technological power and biological understanding, standing united against any threat the galaxy might offer. 3 months after the battle that would become known as the First Contact War, Sarah stood in what had once been a simple research camp and was now the headquarters of the Kepler 442b Interspecies Council. The transformation was remarkable. Human prefabricated structures stood alongside leopard-grown buildings, creating architecture that belonged to both species and neither. The morning briefing brought representatives from both civilizations together, around a table that was itself a symbol of their new alliance, carved from Kepler wood but shaped with human tools, embedded with both human technology and bioluminescent fungi that responded to the emotional states of the leopard people present. Settlement Integration Report, announced Dr. Elena Vasquez, the newly appointed Director of Interspecies Affairs. "We now have 17 joint communities across 3 continents. Population 8,000 humans, 12,000 leopard people, with more arriving on both sides every week." Sarah smiled as she watched the interaction between species that had been strangers 4 months ago. Children were always the fastest to adapt, and human youngsters played alongside leopard cubs in ways that made the adults' formal diplomatic protocols seem unnecessarily complicated. Marcus, now serving as Chief Technology Integration Officer, presented his latest findings. "The biotech developments are exceeding all projections. Leopard biological manipulation, techniques combined with human manufacturing, capabilities have produced materials that are both stronger than steel and capable of self-repair." The leopard representative, Sarah still thought of her as the guide despite learning her actual name was Silver Eyes That See Far, gestured gracefully to indicate her agreement. Her English had become flawless, though she still preferred to communicate important concepts through her people's melodic language when precision was crucial. "The healing knowledge exchange progresses well also," Silver Eyes reported. "Human medicine helps our wounded recover faster. Our plant knowledge helps humans adapt better to this world." Colonel Martinez, now serving as Joint Military Coordinator, looked up from his tactical displays. "More importantly, our combined defensive capabilities have attracted attention from other worlds. We've received 3 formal diplomatic contacts in the past month, species that want to establish peaceful relations with the Kepler Alliance." Sarah felt a warm sense of pride at that designation. The Kepler Alliance had become the official name for their interspecies government, and already it was being recognized across local star systems as a new kind of civilization. "Any word on our cybernetic friends?" she asked. "Long-range sensors detected their retreat to the Proxima sector," Colonel Martinez replied. "Intelligence suggests they've abandoned this approach entirely. Apparently, cooperative species that share technology and tactics weren't part of their strategic planning." Silver Eyes made a sound that Sarah had learned was the leopard equivalent of laughter. "They think in straight lines. We think in circles and spirals. They cannot understand cooperation, so they cannot fight it." The truth of that observation had become the foundation of the Alliance's strength. The cybernetic attackers had been designed to exploit the weaknesses of individual species, human over-reliance on technology, leopard limitation to biological solutions. They'd never anticipated enemies who covered each other's weaknesses while amplifying each other's strengths. Dr. Vasquez pulled up the next item on their agenda. We've received formal colonization requests from 12 Earth governments and 6 off-world human settlements. How do we respond? This was the question that had been troubling Sarah for weeks. The success of the Kepler Alliance had made their world incredibly attractive to humans looking for new opportunities. But uncontrolled immigration could destroy the delicate balance they'd worked so hard to achieve. The Leopard people were here first, Sarah said firmly. Any expansion has to be approved by both species, and we need to maintain the cooperative principles that made this alliance possible. In the first place, Silver Eyes extended a paw to touch Sarah's hand, a gesture that had become common between the species as a sign of agreement and affection. Humans taught us to think beyond our world. We teach humans to think with the world. Together, we choose who shares this knowledge. The afternoon brought Sarah to her favorite part of the new settlement, the integration laboratory where human and leopard scientists worked side by side on projects that neither species could have conceived alone. Today's focus was long-range communication systems that used both quantum entanglement and biological symbiosis to create instantaneous communication across interstellar distances. The implications are staggering, explained Dr. James Park, a physicist who had arrived with the second wave of human colonists. If we can scale this up, we're looking at the first truly instantaneous communication network between star systems. The Leopard scientist working with him, an individual named Bright Patterns in Moonlight, gestured toward their prototype with obvious pride. The living components learn the quantum signatures. Each message creates stronger connections. The network grows smarter with use. Sarah understood the deeper significance. They weren't just creating technology. They were creating the foundation for a truly interspecies civilization that could span multiple worlds while maintaining the cooperation that made it strong. Her personal communicator chimed with a priority message from Earth Command. Sarah stepped outside to take the call privately. Dr. Chen, this is Admiral Rebecca Torres, Earth Defense Fleet. I'm calling to inform you that your analysis of the cybernetic threat has been confirmed. We've detected similar attacks on 3 other colony worlds in the past month. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Casualties? Total. The colonies that faced the attacks alone were completely destroyed. Your world is the only one that successfully repelled the invasion. Because we weren't alone, Sarah said quietly. Admiral, I can't emphasize enough how important the alliance model is. These cybernetic forces are designed to defeat individual species. Only cooperation between different types of intelligence can counter them effectively. That's why I'm calling, Doctor. Earth Command is formally requesting that the Kepler Alliance expand its defensive cooperation to other human worlds. We need allies, and we need the tactical innovations you've developed. Sarah looked back at the integration laboratory, where humans and leopards were creating impossible technologies through impossible cooperation. Admiral, I'll present your request to the Interspecies Council. But I should warn you, the alliance doesn't work because we needed allies. It works because we became friends first. Understood, Doctor. But with respect, friendship might be the only thing that saves human civilization. After the call ended, Sarah found herself walking through the forest paths that connected the various sections of the settlement. The trees here showed signs of both human and leopard influence. Human cultivation techniques that encouraged growth. Leopard biological manipulation that guided that growth in artistic directions. She paused at a memorial grove that had been planted to honor those lost in the original attack. Human and leopard names were carved into living wood that would grow and change over time, ensuring that the memory of their sacrifice would live as long as the forest itself. Silver Eyes found her there, as Sarah had somehow known she would. The leopard's ability to sense emotional states had become one of many small bridges between their species. You are worried about the future, Silver Eyes observed. I'm worried about losing what we've built here, Sarah admitted. Earth wants us to spread the alliance model to other worlds, but what if we lose the cooperation that makes it work? What if we become just another military alliance instead of something genuinely new? Silver Eyes was quiet for a long moment, her blue eyes focused on the memorial grove. Humans think the future is something they can control, she said finally. Leopard people know the future is something that grows from what we plant today. And what are we planting? Understanding, respect, the knowledge that different minds thinking together are stronger than any one mind thinking, alone. Silver Eyes looked directly at Sarah. The cybernetic creatures failed because they could only think one way. The Alliance succeeds because we think in all ways. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus appeared on the path, followed by Colonel Martinez and Dr. Vasquez. Behind them came a mixed group of humans and leopards, the evening planning committee that had become their informal, decision-making body. We've been discussing the Earth Defense Fleet request, Dr. Vasquez announced. The consensus is that we should help, but on our terms, Colonel Martinez nodded. We don't export military technology. We export the Alliance model itself. Any world that wants our help, defending against the cybernetic threat has to commit to full interspecies cooperation if they encounter other intelligent life. No more humans thinking they're alone in the universe, Marcus added. No more species fighting these battles by themselves. Silver Eyes made a sound of approval. The Alliance grows by teaching, not by conquering. Each world finds its own balance, its own cooperation. Sarah felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was how humanity would truly make its mark on the galaxy, not as conquerors or even as defenders, but as the species that had learned to build bridges between minds that had never met. Then that's our answer to Earth Command, she said. We'll help them defend human worlds, but only as part of teaching them to build alliances of their own. As the group began walking back toward the settlement, Sarah realized that the scream that had first brought her to this forest had become something entirely different. It had been a cry for help that became a song of cooperation, a plea for assistance that became the foundation of an entirely new kind of civilization. Looking up at the alien stars beginning to appear in Kepler 442b's evening sky, Sarah knew that somewhere out there, other species were facing the same threats they had overcome. And when those calls for help reached the Kepler Alliance, they would find not just defenders, but teachers ready to show them that no one had to face the darkness alone. The Leopard had seemed to ask for help, and in answering that call, humanity had discovered its true calling among the stars.